And at this time of the year, those words can take on a very special meaning because we're at that juncture, we're at that time of shifting from season to season. And for those of us who try to live in accordance with those natural, very natural changes and shifts that life presents to us, it's a time of renewal, of rebirth, of coming out of that winter, depending where you are. Coming out of that winter and that melting away of those qualities that presented themselves during that winter into the spring. Beginning to hear more of the bird song, seeing more of the expression of this renewal and rebirth in the wonderful colors and the flowers in the spring, those smells, all those things that bring that back for us and in their own way are regenerative for us. Just the smell of the grass, the sound of the birds. And if we are a bit attentive, we will follow that natural flow that occurs, and we'll make adjustments in our lives to help with this renewal, with this assistance. It can be a shift in the times that we rise in the morning, the times that we go to sleep at night. It can be a subtle shift in our diet. As we hit into the summer, we can then begin eating a bit lighter and et cetera. Those of you familiar with Ayurveda, of course, are very familiar with that process of flowing with the seasons and making those adjustments in lifestyle and diet. Those of you who aren't, I would gently suggest to you, take a look. You know, if you happen to know a practitioner or someone, tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, what's up? Things are changing. I think they may have some valuable input for you. So there's a practical aspect to this renewal, rebirth that can present itself to us, especially once again at these times when there's external influences that are in play also that bring about this internal response. This happens with the change of seasons. It can happen through even, well, let's, for the sake of it, call it man-made, or yeah, we'll use that. You know, every January 1st, you know, we all, pardon me for using the word all, but you know where I'm coming from. A lot of us do that thing. We make those resolutions. We make those exclamations. We say those things out loud to help initiate that rebirth, that renewal process. You know, I resolve to not eat cornflakes this year, whatever it is you want to do. Every birthday, once again, there can be that thought of renewal that enters. It's like, okay, I made it one more orbit around this big shiny thing. So let me resolve to make the next orbit around more useful for myself or for others, or whatever it is that we wish to do. But we can see how external influences, be they natural, be they man-made, can initiate that idea of renewal. And that's quite all right, because it's good to stay in tune with natural processes. It is good for one's health in general. It brings into mind a story. Just thinking about it makes me chuckle here. That I heard Roy speak once of his last time with Yogananda, and before Yogananda's transition, and Roy went to see him, and they sat and chatted and meditated, and Roy shared the last words that Yogananda said to him. And I may paraphrase here a bit, not remembering the exact words as Roy spoke them. But he said, Yogananda said to him, don't be concerned with what others may think or do. Don't look behind. Don't look to the right. Do not look to the left. Look straight ahead to the goal. And of course, that goal being fully awake. And he said, when Yogananda, after Yogananda had told him that he pulled out his change purse. And in this change purse was a folded $20 bill. And he took that $20 bill and placed it in Roy's pocket and told him, this is to help with your food. You must stay healthy, for you have much work to do. And those of us who knew Roy know just how true those words were. But the thing is Yogananda didn't forget that practical aspect of Roy keeping himself healthy so that he could continue the work. And then later, when after Yogananda's passing, Roy went to see St. Lin, Mr. James Lin, a very advanced disciple of Yogananda's. And Roy spoke of how he went and sat with Mr. Lin, and they meditated together. And Roy mentioned how wonderful it was to meditate with St. Lin, how he just radiated such calming, lifting energy. And after they had sat in this silence for a while, St. Lin reached in his pocket and pulled out a folded $20 bill and put it in Roy's pocket and said, Master wanted me to give this to you. And whenever I hear that story, or that story comes to mind, it reminds me of how in this process of renewal and rebirth and that we do, that there's a very practical aspect also of taking care of ourselves. And that can be different for each and every one of us, of course. Each one of us has a different situation, a different happening. But the idea is to do the best that you can with what you know to assist this process. Let's look at the subjective part of this, the internal, more internal piece of rebirth and renewal. We've all had those experiences where there's been a subtle shift, a subtle, or not so subtle at times, change in how we see things, in our thoughts, in how we view ourselves, just that shift in perception. That's very subjective. It can happen through intentional actions. Sometimes something as simple as sitting and breathing. Other times through a more prolonged process of undergoing a panchakarma, for instance, an Ayurvedic procedure, or going on a solitary or a group retreat. There can be that shift. A very welcoming, for the most part, shift, that change in perspective. It can happen through the glance of a child. It can happen through the words of a stranger or the words of a very dear and loved one, quite unexpectedly. Sometimes it can be just in watching the flight of a bumblebee. It can make a shift in how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive ourselves and our environment. And these shifts in perception are very welcome or are to be welcomed because they open the door to show us that what we thought, perceived, saw, whatever it is, words you want to use there, it's not the only point of view. It's not only the only point to perceive things from. And this can lead us to a very natural curiosity, and that can lead us to experimentation, which is very useful in this Kriya Yoga practice of ours. As I even say these words now, I saw visually in my mind standing in the hotel room in Mumbai, India, during a trip with Roy there, when I had taken him aside and said, okay, in so many words, let's do this. I won't share the very personal words that was changed, but in a sense, that's what it was. And I remember him very plainly telling me, looking at me, don't believe anything I tell you. Don't believe a word I tell you. Take it, experiment, come to know for yourself. And when we take all that we perceive, all that life presents to us, internally and externally, and experiment, look at it from above, look at it from below, look at it from side to side. Look at it from those different angles of perception and experiment. This can lead to wider, more fuller perceptions of this experience of life, of our knowledge of ourselves, our knowledge of that which we may have a concept of the higher power of God. Sometimes the seeds of a shift, the seeds of a renewal, the seeds of a rebirth can be planted almost unaware to us. There's a word for this in Sanskrit. We call it vipaka. There's a ripening that occurs, that can occur over time. And this is very interesting because there's times when we are challenged in life, when we may be wishing for a renewal because of an uncomfortable situation, because of challenges that have presented themselves in our life. And this could go on for a while. There's a saying that sometimes time takes time. And there can be a seed that's planted that we may be unaware of, that ripens, that sprouts and grows and ripens. And it's in that ripening, through that process of that ripening, sometimes over a period of time, that we see what there was. That we see what was there to be learned, what was there to be perceived by us in a different way. And like I say, this can take time. Don't forget, a seed is planted in the ground. It's planted in the dark. And we've all gone on a walk, and let's say, and we've seen that plant that somehow has found a way to grow through that sidewalk or come out the side of that brick wall. And somehow that very small seed that could be sometimes crushed right there between our fingertips had in it the potential to grow and to move a stone wall, to grow and to move upon ripening, upon its ripening, to move that stone sidewalk. So when we are faced with those challenges, those situations that occur in life, like I say, may challenge us sometimes for a while. Remember those times when one is sitting, that VPOC, allowing that time for things to ripen. The beauty of VPOC. Of course, in our practice as yogis, yoginis, yoglings, whatever you would wish to call yourself, we have our practices and things that we do. And of course, meditation is considered by many to be the anchor of that. For isn't meditation itself a daily dying? Just a daily dying, a daily rebirth, a daily renewing. And with that anchor, even with that anchor, we can take that. And as I spoke of before, we can experiment with that. As I would hear Roy say sometimes, it's good to have those options. So let's just briefly here look at meditation. There can be prayerful meditation. Being prayerful and praying for that spiritual awakening, that knowing of reality, that knowing of the very essence of ourselves, bringing that and leaving it there. Prayerful meditation, meditation of devotion, bhakti yoga. There can be affirmative meditation by simply mentally, or if you are alone, saying it out loud. I am a spiritual being. Or I know the true essence of the light that shines within me, affirming that and leaving it there. Not trying to do a conditioning. This is beyond that. We want to become super conscious meaning above and beyond, not just conditioning of the subconscious mind. And then there is the focus on breath, the internalization, using that in meditation. Just becoming aware of the rising and the falling of the breath, just of our beingness. And then we can sometimes bring in mantra, the meditation on sound, the repeating of whatever it is that allows us to become centered and become able to internalize. It may be something as simple as Om, Soham, Hamsa, or something very personal that could be to us. Dive deep, whatever it is. And that can be combined with meditation on breath, with the rising of the breath, saying the first part of the mantra, either mentally or out loud, and with the falling of the breath, and allowing that to happen. So there we can see on that daily renewal, that daily rebirth, how we can experiment, how we can find that which then internalizes us. But let's be truthful about it. There's times when nothing seems to work. We get stuck. We can get stuck, or there can be even a bit of fearfulness, a bit of uncertainty. And what is all this about? Nothing I'm doing is working here. Sometimes that's just the wanting or desire for a better, I think is a better word for that, of that immediate result, not allowing for what we spoke of earlier, that vipaka, that ripening, that blooming from within. But when those times do happen, when we do or may feel that doubt, that uncertainty, or let's just say, stuff ain't working, man. I'm breathing, I'm chanting, I'm doing this, but it isn't happening. That's the time for us to remember the basics, to just remember the basics. Sometimes in this teaching, we can be a little diverted by the flashing lights and that kind of a thing. And sometimes we get away from the basics. As a musician, I know how that occurs. Those of you who are musicians in the house or artists or creative people know how when you begin learning, you learn the basic strokes or the basic thing that you do, or, you play the whatever. And then you expand on that. You become creative. You can add your own into it, or you become more fluent. But you never stop practicing the basics. Pablo Casals, I think when he was like over 90 years old, for those of you who do, Pablo Casals was one of the world's foremost cellists. And upon an interview, I think, gosh, he was 90 plus. He was asked, why at your age are you still practicing? Here you got this 90-year-old world master, and he's practicing. And his response to that was, because I think I'm finally starting to learn something. Those are words for us to take. Stay with the basics. Don't forget your nadi shodanas, your alternate nostril breathings. Don't forget your mantras. Don't forget those things, those kriya pranayama, those things that you were taught upon initiation. Initiation itself being a rebirth, a renewal. Let's look at, as I am running out of words here, because renewal, rebirth, to express them with words is difficult. So as I prance around the idea, it brings to mind words that were spoken to me by my musical mentor, getting back to that. He told me, and I didn't know the meaning of these words at the time. I took it just at the time as words to apply to my music, but it turned out to be words to live by. We were on stage and we were playing, and he would challenge me, constantly challenge me. And sometimes I would get so mad at him because he would call stuff that he knew I didn't know and stuff, but he would challenge me. And he did that once. And I didn't know what to do. And he looked at me and he said, pardon my voice here, but this is my imitation. He said, Ray, if you don't know what to play, don't play anything. And that hit me. And I thought about that. And that has stayed with me through life. If you don't know what to play, don't play anything. As a musician, of course, you can imagine how frightening that is. You're on stage, you don't know what to do. People are playing around you, and you're in front of a bunch of, it's like, oh my gosh, what am I? I have to do something. I have to do something. There's some action I must take. There's something I must do. But I found when I took him at his word, that when I didn't know what to play and didn't play anything, that he and the musicians around me knew what to do. They would alter what they were doing so that it sounded like my not playing at that time was a very natural part of what was occurring. There are no wrong notes. It's what you play afterwards that matters. And so I stayed with that. And that brings us now to a point where I really want to get, I guess, on this, which is renewal and rebirth really aren't that. We perceive them as that because in that moment, there's this freshness, there's more clarity, there's a new way of seeing things. But aren't renewal and rebirth just a remembrance in reality? A remembrance of what we truly are, that true essence of ourselves. Some say in quantum terms that our perception of reality is just an infinite succession of moments. And that's very interesting because in that infinite succession of moments, we can take any one of those infinite moments and be reborn, be renewed, or remember what we are. Not who we are, not who we are, what we are. And a lot of the time that is accomplished sometimes not by those very things that I just spoke to you about, meditation, mantra, prayer, affirmation. Let all of that be what it is. But sometimes all there is to do when you don't know what to play, when you don't know what to do, or when there is nothing else to do, you sit. And in that sitting, there's no effort applied or exerted or directed to meditate, to do this or to do that. Sit. And you will find that if you sit long enough, all that was covering you will fall away. All that you were hearing, the clatter and the noise, the internal noise, will subside. Just sit. And after this practice of sitting, which should be a daily practice, tadandrastu sprupe vastanam, the third sutra of Patanjali's great treatise of yoga. Then the seer rests in their own nature. We will find ourselves just through the sitting in that silence. And in that silence, we will experience the stillness that is inseparable from it. And in that silence and that stillness, is that what we are, without desire. Moksha Bheksha Bandaha from the Vedantic scriptures. Even the desire for liberation is a bondage. Allow it all to fall away. All desire. And sit. And then that renewal, rebirth, and remembrance will be known. Let's, with that, let's again come back to our breath. Let's sit together and breathe. And let us take the time that we have left together here in silence and meditation to share that with each other. Let us acknowledge that infinite reality, the truth. Let us acknowledge all saints and sages of all true enlightenment traditions and those of our lineage. Mahavatar Baba Ji, Sri Sri Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Paramahansa Yogananda, and Roy Eugene Davis. Come comfortable, just as you need. And go within using whatever technique you find useful and effective. Be that mantra, be that breathing. And let us sit. As we sit here in silence, gently bring your attention to your breath. And as you breathe in, feel the flow of breath energy up the right side of the spine. And as you exhale, allow that breath energy to gently fall down the left side of the spine. Then, upon inhale again, feel the breath energy going up the left side of the spine. And on exhale, falling down the right. Breathing like this alternately for a few minutes. And as we share these last few moments of silence together, let us know that in this silence, grace can enter. For it is in that stillness, in that space of silence, that grace is allowed to enter. And know that the shining light of essence, your essence of being, illumines your consciousness. Know that the enlivening force that supports all of this creation and universe is also supportive of you. Let us chant Om 3 times together. Om. 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 Thank you, one and all, for joining me and joining us.